Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a couple of coffee Imperial stouts. It's been a while since I've done some coffee stouts and certainly Imperials. Both of these are brewers that we've had before, but neither of which I've ever had a stout from, let alone an Imperial coffee stout. So we're going to be starting today with Kings County Brewers Collective Lightning Coffee Imperial Stout. This one clocks in at 9% ABV. They're based in Brooklyn, New York. Then jumping over to number 2, it's been a while since we've done a beer by them, Lupulin Brewing Company out of Big Lake, Minnesota. This is called Coffee Shop Assault Vehicle. This one clocks in at 11% ABV, and it was also brewed with cacao nibs and bourbon-infused coffee beans. So we're going to be stepping up the intensity. One just a standard, Imperial Stout brewed with coffee. One that's kind of taking a twist on that recipe. But they both, I expect, are going to be awesome. So I'm going to jump right in. We're going to start with the Kings County Brewer Collective Lightning. This one clocks in at 9% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in with the first beer of today's Imperial Coffee Stout review, we have got Kings County Brewers Collective Lightning Coffee Imperial Stout. The clock's in at 9% ABV. They are based in Brooklyn, New York. So first things first, as always, they have really awesome label art on here. This one, keeping tradition with their kind of comic book character theme art. It's got what looks like Thor smashing down his hammer. I'm hoping that I'm turning that away from the glare so the camera can pick it up because it's pretty awesome. And then lightning shooting out of it all over the place. But that's the extent of the label art, so let's get this bad boy cracked. My first stout from them. I'm very excited about this. Let's get this poured right in the old stout glass here. Ooh, that's very dark indeed. It's pouring like it's got some decent resistance to it too. Let me try to agitate a bit, give it a chance to form a head here. Slow it down. Not going to quite get the whole thing in there. Wow, that's an impressive aroma. It's very, very pungent. I can smell it from here. It smells a little bit sweet, a little bit boozy, and I can definitely smell roastiness, and I can smell the coffee quite clearly. So it does smell very, very nice. Visually, as I would expect, it is absolutely pitch black. Imperial Stout as it should be. Plus it's got coffee in there, just adding more depth. The head formed beautifully here. Honestly, it did. This formed just lush. Looks like a thick, creamy, dense pillow of head floating on top. In terms of carbonation that I can still see, there's just tiny little bits of super fine, super small, very champagne-like bubbles that are kind of clinging to the sides of the glass, but mostly looks like the bulk of the activity is stopped. I don't see a big rush coming up from under the bottom, so this head ought to hold pretty well. Let's get right up over it for a proper sniff. Oh yeah, man, that smells fantastic. Very pungent aroma on this one. You can absolutely smell just the depth of the roastiness to the malt that they used. It smells fantastic. Probably has some chocolate malt in here. I'm picking up some of those chocolate undertones. The coffee comes through very, very clearly. It smells just like wonderful, fresh brewed coffee. That's what it smells to me. And that's mixing with that deep, roasty malt bill that's coming through. There's a little bit of a chocolate hint to it, slight hint of nuttiness to it, and there's just a slight hint of sweetness. I don't think they put lactose in this beer at all, but when you're brewing with all these different interesting malts and how they all mix together, the aromas can come off, one way and the flavor may come off another. So that head is holding true. Let's just jump right in and see what this is about. Oh, that's delicious. Yeah, it's absolutely delicious. This is classic coffee stout. There's nothing about this I dislike. This is very classic. This feels to me just like a well-executed version of a classic stout recipe that they added coffee to, and it's in imperial form. It's just so bold. The flavors are so bold and pungent and rich and intense. It is absolutely delicious. You're just hit with the intensity of the malt bill, and it's multi-layered. I'm getting a lot of roast in there, getting a little bit of a smoky edge, a little bit of char. I'm getting some baked bread notes, some toast, some crumb. It's kind of all in there. It's a really, really nice malt bill. And then the coffee beans that they chose to use, they did mention on the side here, it is Spectrum Coffees. So I don't know exactly what type of beans they used, what roast it is, but I can tell you it does pair exceptionally well with their malt bill. And maybe some of that smokiness is coming from a deeply roasted bean. They could have used like an Italian or a French roast. Those are basically roasted to the edge of being burned and pulled just before they catch. They'll hit that smoke point and then you pull them. That's why those coffee varieties are so intense. And if you don't like big, intense, bordering on smoky, very earthy, and often you get a lot of bitters. And that's actually one thing I was noticing as I was drinking on this. Stouts can kind of be all over the board in terms of their bitter profile. This one, I'm getting a really nice helping of bitters, which I personally like. It's just another counterbalance aspect of it that goes into making the whole experience what it is. I'm a big, big fan of this one. I'm going to jump back in for body and mouthfeel, think on the finish and flavor development a bit here in the balance. Overall, I'd say the body is medium, maybe just behind the border of medium, medium heavy, but it's a nice solid medium. This is an Imperial, but it's 9%. It's not overboard. It feels appropriate for the ABV. Mouthfeel, similar story here, but it's actually a little bit more impressive than I anticipated. There's a lot more resistance in this mouthfeel than I would expect in an ABV of this range for this style. It really feels quite nice. It gives the beer a whole lot of substance on the palate. In terms of what happens when you agitate around the palate, it does get a little creamy, but it's not silky, it's not velvety, it doesn't get foamy. It just creams up and thickens up a little bit more, which just adds more of that textural experience to the beer drinking. It's really quite nice. It feels great on the palate. In terms of the way that the flavors develop, the first thing that you do get is the coffee. It's very big, it's very intense. It's very strong with coffee. Behind that, you start to get the roast of that, and then the malt bills start to mix with all of that, and then you can start independently picking out all of the different malt bill traits. There's absolutely some coffee notes coming from the malt bill itself that's a distinctly different coffee flavor than what's obviously coming from the beans here. Just as there's this underlying kind of chocolatey note, very much this like nice smoky note, earthy note, and some baked good and char and crumb and toast. It's just all in there. This is just an exceptionally, exceptionally well done Imperial Coffee Stout. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's just trying to execute one as close to flawlessly as one can. And job well done, Kings County Brewers Collective. This is just absolutely fantastic. Been a while since I've had some coffee stouts. I love them. And this is a great way to jump back in after many, many weeks. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, quote my scores. When we come back, we will get to the second beer of today's review, and that is Lupulin Brewing Company's Coffee Shop Assault Vehicle. That one clocks in at 11% ABV. Okay, now for the second beer of today's Coffee Imperial Stout review, we have got Lupulin Brewing Company's Coffee Shop Assault Vehicle. This one clocks in at 11% ABV, Imperial Stout with cacao nibs and bourbon-soaked coffee beans, so bourbon infused. They're based in Big Lake, Minnesota. This is another brewer we've had quite a few brews from that I reviewed, but I haven't done any stouts, so I'm going to get into this one. I'm very excited. In terms of label art, it's pretty cool. Kind of looks a bit like a beanie bearded hipster riding on a moped with his cat on the front and fresh coffee in his hand. Gonna try to angle that. So kind of gets you in the mood, sets the scene, and let's just get this one cracked. Gently, gently. All right, and we'll get this poured right in and see what this one's about. As I'm pouring this one's pretty dark, though it's not as pitch black as the first, but it is pretty dark. It's got a thickness to it, but it's not super, super thick as it pours out, though it is forming quite a nice head here. Let me back off and leave some room. Got it dripping down the can. Leave a little room. Yeah, that had no problem forming a head. Just like the first, it formed a really nice, thick, dense, creamy head there. I mean, that's just beautiful. Visually though, even though it didn't look quite as dark as it poured, yet again, as expected, it's an Imperial 11%. It's pitch black, as I would anticipate. This is another one. I can tell you it's got a pretty pronounced aroma, though I can't smell it quite as clearly as I could on the last from about 1.5 feet away. So let's get right up on it. Oh yeah, it smells delicious. Even through that dense, thick head of foam, you can very clearly smell this is a stout. It's got that underlying roastiness to it. You can very clearly smell the coffee and also the fact that they bourbon soaked, bourbon infused the coffee beans. That bourbon is coming through very clearly. So you're getting a little bit of everything. Getting malt bill, you're getting coffee, and you're getting that bourbon back. And it smells absolutely fantastic. You know, I've had a lot of bourbon barrel aged stouts and coffee stouts, but never had one where the coffee beans themselves were actually bourbon infused. That's a really clever move. We're going to see what kind of difference that does to the flavor profile. Yeah, it just smells fantastic though. Big bourbon, big roasty malt, big coffee. It's all in there. In fact, if you had told me this were bourbon barrel aged versus bourbon infused beans, I would have believed it. It smells very similar. So we're going to jump in and see what this is about. The heads settle down a little bit. Still pretty thick, so it's going to make a mess of my beard, but you know, that's the price I have to pay. Let's jump in. Oh, that's another big beer. It's another big beer. I gotta say the intensity of flavor on this one is a little more subtle than on the last. But all the flavors, yet again, come through very, very crystal clearly. And the way this one is tiered is, the first thing that you do get is that bourbon. That's the flavor that comes through first, both as you're agitating around the palate and after you swallow. Behind the bourbon is the coffee. Behind the coffee is the roasty malt bill. And it really is very equal. It's very balanced. The flavor profile is very, very balanced. It's just the order of operations. It's bourbon, coffee, malt. And I got to tell you, while the flavor intensity isn't quite as in your face as the last one, it's not lacking flavor by any stretch of the imagination. It's all in there and it's absolutely delicious. Yet again, just another very, very well done stout. So how does the bourbon infused bourbon soaked bean differ from a bourbon barrel aging? I'll tell you, the notable difference is that kind of woodiness from the barrel. I'm not picking up notes of wood from the barrel, notably because there weren't any. But I'm definitely still picking up the bourbon, and if anything, the bourbon clarity is more pronounced in this than its bourbon barrel aged counterpart. The bourbon is a lot more clear, and I'm getting a lot more bourbon typical nuances that are coming through. So there is this underlying sense of sweetness that bourbon imparts. There's an underlying kind of vanilla back to it as well. And there's an underlying kind of, I don't know, molasses or brown sugar, like almost caramelly quality that's coming through from that bourbon that you don't always get from barrel-aged beers, but in the actual bourbon infusing itself, it's coming through very, very clearly. It tastes almost like fresh bourbon just on top of the coffee or poured into the coffee in a stout form. It's really freaking delicious. Man, it's a really smart idea. It's quite a bit different. It's a different take on how to do it, but I approve. I wholeheartedly approve. I think it's really, really delicious. It's a clever move, and it is a bit different. So, you know, that's just something to note about this. It's a little bit different than their barrel-aged counterparts, but it's equally enjoyable, equally delicious. It's just got some different nuance that comes through. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for. Clever play, though, for my money. In terms of the body and mouthfeel, I'll jump back in for a second kind of exposure to it, but my initial thought was, wow, this doesn't feel as heavy or as full in terms of body and mouthfeel as an 11% you would expect at all. It's got a presence, sure. It doesn't feel flat, but it's not as big and heavy and robust as you would expect for this style in this ABV range. I'm going to jump back in, think on this flavor development a bit more, and really pick apart this body and mouthfeel. Okay, so on second sip, all of the flavors really intensify significantly. The body, I got another trip around to get the body in the mouthfeel. The body to me really just feels medium. It's not even bordering on medium heavy. It doesn't feel that heavy. It feels much less broad than you would expect from an 11% on an Imperial. But it doesn't feel light. It's just not as big as you would expect. The mouthfeel, it's got some resistance to it, but again, it's maybe not quite as resistant as you would expect for the style in this ABV range. But again, it doesn't feel lackluster. It's just not as big and in your face. And really texturally, what that does is it lets you focus maybe a little bit more on the flavors you're getting. First sip, I thought, okay, this is not as intense and bold and in your face as the first beer. On second sip, it really just layered the flavor on top and really helped boost the intensity of it. And that bourbon, it's the first thing you get, and it's way more intense on that second sip. I mean, it's almost like you're pouring bourbon into your coffee here. It really does taste that fresh and bold and in your face. There's a lot of boozy back to it, a lot of boozy quality, but it's not in a bad way. I mean, boozy in a good way. It's got bourbon in it, and you know you're freaking drinking something with bourbon in it. It's really delicious. It really does put me in mind of fresh bourbon just poured right into your coffee. In this case, in your coffee beer. It's absolutely delicious. It's very bold. The coffee, same thing. That intensifies as well. And the coffee comes through very, very clearly. It's a nice coffee flavor without being super bold. It doesn't taste the edge of burn. It's not coming across to me as like a French or Italian roast coffee. Just kind of middle of the road with a nice bold coffee flavor. Elements of it kind of remind me of the intensity of cold brew, but with a bourbon back. And that's a really nice compliment. Where the kind of earthiness is coming through is really where the coffee is marrying with the malt bill. The malt bill is very dark. It's very deep. Obviously, it's got that added cacao nib, so there is this chocolatey undertone, but that's where this underlying earthiness is coming from. And there's a little bit of bittering. I don't want to say it's the smoky side of the beans or of the malts, but it's definitely got an earthiness to it, and there is this nice bit of bitters that are coming through in the palate, and it all just works together. This beautiful marriage in perfect harmony, bourbon, coffee, and malt bill, and it's just absolutely delicious. Both of these beers, honestly, just very, very well put together. Exceptionally well balanced, just exceptionally well executed. They're both a little bit different, but they're both absolutely delicious. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both beers, we're going to get them ranked. Starting with Kings County Brewers Collective's Light the Lightning. This was an Imperial Stout that was brewed with coffee. They are based in Brooklyn, New York, 9% ABV on this one. Very first stout I've ever had by Kings County. Starting with the aroma, this was one of those, it was just positively massive. Huge, huge roasty malt aromas came and just permeated out of there, as did the coffee. I had a suspicion I would be in for a treat before I even had first sip. Very pungent, smelled fantastic. It's a 10 out of 10. For the taste, honestly, in terms of a coffee Imperial Stout, I'm not sure what else I could possibly ask for. I mean, it absolutely nailed it. All of the classic elements of a stout malt bill were present. There was a ton of just classic roasty malt. There were chocolatey undertones. There were coffee undertones before the added coffee even made a presence. And it all just worked beautifully. You could pick all of the underlying flavors out independently. Just a masterpiece. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the body on this was definitely above average. It was maybe not quite as robust as I expected for 9%, but it didn't miss the mark by much. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this was perfect for me. It was huge, it was viscous, there was a lot of resistance. It still felt like a classic stout, but it felt really big and really kind of matched that body. Granted, the body wasn't quite as big as I expected. The mouthfeel was maybe a bit more viscous, so they really paired evenly. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, Stout's one of the styles we talk about this often. you never really know what you're going to get. This was definitely longer than average, and really it was the depth of the roasting and the coffee intensity that helped push it out longer than your average Imperial Stout. It wasn't crazy long, but it was definitely longer than average. Gets a 7 out of 10. Head and retention, this one formed beautifully to be poured at home. It's exactly what I was hoping for. This easily could have come off of a tap. It poured nice, thick, creamy, foamy head, stuck around the whole time. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook, jet black, 10 out of 10. For the balance, I talked about this when I talked about the taste, and taste is a very large aspect of balance, but there's more that goes into balance than just taste. And for me, it was all in there. Balance of aromas, balance of flavors, balance of intensity of flavor and how they all work together. They just nailed it. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I loved it. Most Kings County Brewers Collective beers I've had have been great. First stout, and I'm hoping I can find some more because this truly was fantastic. 10 out of 10 subjectively. Finally, as an example of the style, really this beer scored very well across the board. Only missed a few points in a couple different categories and nothing that was so critical that I don't think that this beer shouldn't get the top marks. I think it earned it. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10 here, which brings the total score on Kings County Brewers Collective Light the Lightning to a 96 out of 100. This beer was nearly a perfect Imperial Coffee Stout for my money. Absolutely loved it. Moving on to beer number 2. This was Lupulin Brewing Company's Coffee Shop Assault Vehicle, also an Imperial Stout. And this one was a little bit of a different twist. They added cacao nibs on this one, and then it was brewed with bourbon-soaked coffee beans. So yes, both Imperial Coffee Stouts, but this one bourbon-soaked theirs, and they also added additional cocoa nibs. The ABV on this one, 11%, so 2% higher than the first. They're based in Big Lake, Minnesota. So starting with the aroma on this beer was fantastic, just as with the first one. Though, really for my money, it was missing a little intensity that the first one had. Don't get me wrong, it was well above average, and all of the same classic hallmarks were noticeable in this one. Big, roasty coffee undertones, chocolate undertones. The bourbon that they soaked those beans really made an appearance as well. It just wasn't quite as intense. I only docked 1 point though. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the taste, absolutely loved this one. Let me tell you, bourbon soaking coffee beans to infuse those before you add it into your beer, that's a genius move, and it absolutely paid off. It was so good, such a great idea. I don't know if other brewers are gonna try some things like that, but it really worked well in this beer. Perfect 10 out of 10. For the body was one of the categories on this beer that really surprised me. 11%, even bigger than the first, but this body really was just middle of the road for me. It was a medium, it was nowhere as robust as I expected, and it just gets average. It gets a 5 out of 10. Mouthfeel, similar story. Another category here that surprised me a bit. Body, you never really know. Mouthfeel, you never really know. ABV and the style are going to give you a decent idea, but I was thinking, okay, the body's not that robust, but let's really explore the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel just didn't do it for me either. It was really middle of the road. There wasn't a ton of viscosity. That said, the body and the mouthfeel did match each other, but they were nowhere near as robust and resistant as you would expect for this beer style in this ABV range. Mouthfeel gets a 5 out of 10 as well. For the finish on this beer was absolutely well above average. We talk about this all the time, just talked about it on the first one. You never really know what you're going to get with a stout, but this one was a very flavor intensive stout, no question about it. The intensity was even greater than in the first beer. And yeah, it had some added ingredients. It had the cacao nibs, and then they bourbon soaked those coffee beans. All of these elements really went into making an even more intense flavor that stuck around on the back of the palate even longer. Finish gets an 8 out of 10 here. For the head retention, this was just like the first. Could have been pulled off of a tap. It was lovely. Gets a 10 out of 10. Appearance, same story, pitch black, 10 out of 10. Balance. The balance on this beer was exquisite. Kind of the same reason and the same story as with the first. It gets the points and all for the same reasons. It's just a very perfectly balanced stout. All of the ingredients that they put into here came through. They all played their part. Nothing was vying for our attention, and that includes even the intensity of the bourbon. It was all balanced. It all came through just how I wanted. Perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I loved it. I loved it. This was a very good beer. Gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Finally, as an example of the style. Overall, this beer did well across most categories, but it did lose some pretty hefty points in both body and mouthfeel. Those aren't so big that I think I should bash the score completely, but as an example, I have to take that into consideration. I only docked 1 point, it gets a 9 out of 10, which brings the total score on Lupulin Brewing Company's Coffee Shop Assault vehicle to an 86 out of 100. So we're only looking at a 10-point spread here, a 96 and an 86. Both of these are well above average, and really, if you take body and mouthfeel out of the equation where they got a 5 on both, so it lost 10 just there alone, I mean, nearly identical beer drinking experiences. It really just came to body and mouthfeel on this one for me. But overall, these beers were just absolutely delicious. Well worth your time. If you're a fan of coffee Imperial stouts, these are two to seek. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.